Alexa Dunn here, and today I am going over 5 common misconceptions about pantsers. Pantsers being people who don't plot their novels heavily ahead of time. They fly by the seat of their pants when they are writing. This, of course, is like the neatest way to put it, but you can also call pantsers discovery writers, headlights writers. There's lots of different ways to go at it, but the crux of it is pantsers plan a lot less ahead of time than plotters. But there are a lot of misconceptions out there about what that actually means. Plotting is kind of the default. The idea is that writers who write books must plan ahead of time. You must outline. Outlining is the best and only way to write books. But plenty of writers fall into the pantsing camp, including some pretty famous writers like Stephen King and George R.R. Martin, though George R.R. Martin coined the term gardeners, architects versus gardeners, which is yet another way to think about this writing style, this style of writing process. So the first misconception I have heard is that simply pantsers are too lazy to outline. They don't have the wherewithal, the work ethic, to outline like a pro. And I know this is hard to understand if you are a diehard outliner, but for some writers, for some creatives, it's just, there is a mental roadblock to outlining that makes it very difficult or impossible to write a book. And it is possible to write a book without an outline. Writers who don't plot ahead of time and don't use outlines are just as hardworking as any other writer. It's not laziness that leads to pantsers not outlining. Writing a book is hard no matter which way you slice it, guys. There's no lazy writers who write and complete novels. The second misconception is that pantsers don't follow or know plot structure. And again, this is not unilaterally true. Again, it's a different creative process, and many pantsers, professional pantsers, instead of outlining story structure ahead of time and defining every single beat in the plot ahead of time, they know story structure and beats in their bones. And pantsers really run along a spectrum, and some plan more than others. But generally speaking, even the most unrepentant pantser has some story structure in mind. Generally, you're not going to sit down to write a novel unless you have an idea of where characters are starting, kind of big twists in the middle, and generally where you want things to end, even if you don't know the specifics. It's definitely possible to kind of ingest plot structure by osmosis and feel it out in your writing as you are writing it. And I know that if you are a diehard outliner that this sounds crazy and it's hard to kind of describe the different and other side of the process. But when I pants novels, when I am writing novels, I actually have story structure very close to mind. As I am kind of figuring out what I'm doing, I'm thinking about beats and where kind of emotions need to rise and fall and where I need to have a plot twist because XYZ has to happen. I'm still doing that work, I'm just not doing it ahead of time. The third misconception is that pantsers' books are always a bloody mess. They write giant piles of garbage because they don't plan anything ahead of time. And this just isn't unilaterally true for all pantsers. Professional pantsers who have written novels before and know what they're doing, you'd be surprised how not complete hot messes their books can be. While yes, pantsing can reveal all sorts of surprises as you're drafting, that can lead to some serious revision. All books need revision. Personally, I find that the general skeleton of my books don't really change that much. I always have to do pointed revision, sometimes to work around things I discovered in a pantsing draft, but they're not flaming piles of garbage and don't change as drastically as you would think. And I'd like to point out that pantsers and plotters can produce messy first drafts. There are plotters who follow outlines but get off track. There are pantsers who don't follow outlines and get off track. Writers generally are a spectrum, and some are better at producing solid, clean first drafts than others. That really isn't strictly a pantser problem. And the fourth misconception is that with pantsers it's all or nothing. I think this is actually also a misconception about plotters. I found in talking with fellow pantsers as well as some of my friends who are plotters that we all fall closer to the middle than you would believe. Many pantsers plan a decent amount of their books ahead of time, and many plotters, though they might outline, plan more or less just as much as a pantser does. The writing process really is organic and it is a spectrum. It's not all or nothing. If someone truly sits down and all they have is the spark of an idea and they literally pants an entire novel with nothing planned ahead of time, I'd honestly love to talk to that writer. And it is possible that some of these misconceptions are true of those extreme cases, but most writers, plotters, and pantsers are going to fall along a planning versus not planning spectrum, and the results are going to run the gamut in terms of the structure in the novel and the quality of the draft that is produced. Which leads me to misconception number 5, which is that if you are a pantser, your end products aren't as good as the end products of plotters. This one really gets my goat because it's really unfair to pantsers, and I think it gives a little bit too much credit to plotters because, again, we're not all that different. The thing is, any book can be not great, whether or not the writer plotted it or pantsed it. Plotting isn't inherently better than pantsing, and each individual writer is going to bring different skills to the table. Any problem that can be produced by pantsing a draft can be fixed in revision. And same thing with plotting. There are inherent problems that come with plotting, and talented writers know how to fix it in revisions. So with a final product, you really shouldn't be able to tell what the writer's writing style was, and I'd wager that most of the time you can't guess. So it's a bit insulting to say that if you read a book and you don't think it's any good, that, it's because they're a pantser and pantsing is a garbage writing style. I can bring you just as many books that were plotted by their authors that similarly fall apart plot-wise or structure-wise, arc-wise. There's nothing inherent in either of these processes that leads to amazing books or not amazing books. It's down to the individual writer and their abilities and their skill level. Really, can't we all just get along? I'd love to stop hearing some of these misconceptions about pantsers, and this is kind of like dog lovers versus cat lovers, in that you rarely hear cat lovers going hard at why dogs are terrible and dog people are terrible, because most cat people love all animals, but dog people love to rag on cat people. It's very similar. For some reason, there is this contingent of plotters who are just militant about how it's the only and best way to write a book, and pantsers must be lazy and terrible and write awful, messy books. And it hurts, guys. We're all trying to write books, and seriously, if you're a plotter, have some real in-depth conversations with pantsers about what their writing process actually looks like. And if you're a fellow pantser, talk to some plotters. It's quite a wonderful thing to realize how much common ground you have, either specifically in the pre-planning drafting phase or in editing, because as I mentioned, we can all end up with problems in our novel, and we all have to solve them in revision. So let's stop with the drawing lines in the sand and saying that one thing is better than the other, and just let writers figure out their individual writing process and style. It takes all sorts to write a book, and I think that's okay. But I hope I dispelled some of these misconceptions if you fell on the side that thought some of these things, or even if you're a pantser who was thinking some of these terrible things about yourself. It's not the pantsing that creates some of the problems and misconceptions, it's the individual writer, and everything is fixable. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I'll make more content about writing process and style, and specifically pantsing, because so many of you have asked me to make more videos on my process and my thoughts on this, which is why you got this video. I really do pay attention to what you want to see. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and happy writing, whether you plot or you pants.